back to the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition Earth Day is Everyday podcast. I am Marnese Jackson. I am the Executive Director of the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition. And our mission is to decarbonize the Midwestern building sector by 2050. And our focus states are Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio. We are going to get into the information of why Earth Day is every day, and we are here to celebrate our members in the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition and why they're doing this work. But we were here to focus on equity, and that's why we are emphasizing the HIMAS principles for democratic organizing, the climate justice principles, and creating our work around people who have been impacted by high energy burden and environmental racism. So joining me today is Aprili Amani. Aprili is an author, a gardener, and the founder of the Equity. How do you say that, Aprili?
Equally Yoked Yoga.
Okay, thank you. Equally Yoked Yoga. Okay, thank you so much for telling me that. The realest memoir ever. Aprili is. We're so glad to have you here today, and if you could please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Greetings, Marnese, and everyone out there. Yes, Aprili here, and I use we and I interchangeably. Also, I use she, her pronouns. We have from Indianapolis, Indiana, and also known as Naptown. Don't sleep on us. To Black folks here, and we want to acknowledge the Miami and Lenape, also known as Delaware people, my people, which Indianapolis sits on, as well as the Kickapoo, Peoria, Potawatomi, Shawnee, people of the ancestral lands of Indiana. And another thing about me is I am a Spelman alumna, very proud of my alma mater and avid traveler. And I founded Aprili Yoga as a mobile yoga studio in 2012 while studying in Philly. And we became brick and mortar. Actually, I remember it was the 21st day of September of 2021. So I'm excited to share with you a bit about my journey in the climate justice space and arena.
Well, let's just go ahead and get into it. So, what does Earth Day Every Day mean to you?
Okay, so the greatest part of the concept of Earth Day Every Day to me means just being your natural self, showing up and allowing yourself to be authentic, and also to take up space and fill in space, and showing up as like your full self, your full energy. And so I really believe that we people as components of the environment have to think about ourselves as like the role that we play in peopling environments and things of that sort. And so I would say that the first thing that comes to mind is really what it means to just be yourself, and then also continually learn about sustainable, renewable practices and resources. Mm-hmm. And I have some fun examples that I could get into if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell us more.
So something I thought would be fun to talk about is the idea of using a bidet. And so with Aprili of Yoga, we've done lots of composting, and I think it's really important that we talk about like the natural processes that we experience as people and things like that. So I like to talk to people about like the fact that using water and using either a makeshift bidet or having a bidet, which of course is a sprayer that can be used to wash your bottom, or a makeshift bidet could be even like a large cup or container. Sometimes I like to use like a container from the wipes that you might use. Mm-hmm. So reusing a container like that, and using this water as a way to wash your bottom or wash mm-hmm. yourself, rather than using toilet paper all the time. Mm-hmm. And we can look back on how, throughout or across the U.S., people, kind of um, had a really big scare, and toilet paper was scarce,
Oh my gosh.
and so many people laughed from other countries, all across the world, because um, using water in a bidet is such a natural practice that so many people across the world use, and so that's something I think is always a fun way to kind of break the ice and talk about, like, washing our bottoms with water more so than toilet paper.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, because not having toilet paper and it was a scarcity. Yeah, I was like, we just need to just hop in the shower after that because I mean, if we're limited, well, what are we gonna do, right? So,
Yes, and I wanted to mention, when I mentioned the bidet, how
mm,
it's actually very easy. You can sometimes find them pretty affordably.
oh,
I would say maybe about, you can find them for about $30 up to, they can go very high. And then they can easily be attached to the water line that pumps into your toilet, and it's the clean water going in. And so there are many ways that we can make, like, bidets or even makeshift bidets more common in the U.S. And it's just something that I like to kind of bring up and challenge people to consider. And so that's something that I do. I just use like a container, and it helps. And I think what's a more fun way to get into to get into topics on green living than to talk about poop.
you know what, and people think, in the work that we do, working in buildings, um, that's the only thing that we're focused on. If we look at the environmental movement and climate movement, there's so many different areas that we can hit, as you have said, making sure that our bottom is, clean equally, because you want to make sure that we are very cleansed in that area, so we won't produce toxins in the air, to other people in our surroundings, even though it's a natural thing, but we want to release those toxins into the appropriate place, and not have others endure those smells that come out of our bottom. So thanks so much for lifting that up. I mean, there's another way to look about it. I wouldn't have thought about it.
Oh yes, I look forward to talking more about that with,
Oh my
so
God.
many conversations about green building and things like that. I think
Yeah.
that it's something that we can do every day to just reduce our footprint on in terms of the toilet paper industry and things like that.
You know
So
what? More sustainable practices for our environment, the better. But I wanted to also ask you, what are some what do you like to do to honor the earth? Like, because Earth Day was on Monday, and we're doing this everyday Earth Day podcast, and we want to know, what do you do specifically to honor Earth Day?
well, yes, Earth Day was just 2 days ago, Monday, and we celebrated. I did forget to mention how we celebrated Earth Day Power Hour, and the idea was, to focus on conversations around renewable power and energy sources. And want to definitely say thank you from Equally Yoked Yoga, and from Tease Me, and from Creative Energy Arts for sponsoring us, and just having the support of my coalition of Midwest BDC, of knowing that with all that we do to encourage people to get involved in the conversation, and to honor Earth, that we can find support in Midwest BDC. So thank you very much so for Monday's support.
Thank you. What were some of the key highlights of the event? And no problem, I'm glad we were able to support.
Yes. So the key highlights were, we were able to make seed balls. We
Okay.
were able to distribute native trees. We were able to distribute elderberry, pawpaw, and persimmon, and something called swamp oak. It was, there's another term for it, but
Okay.
it's called swamp chestnut oak. And so we were able to distribute those with the help of Flannel Farms here.
Okay.
And we also were able to create these Earth Day prayer flags where the idea is to really kind of focus on the mindfulness nature of letting go. And so the prayer flags will kind of shrivel and things of that sort over time. And it's a non-toxic way to kind of decorate spaces and especially the outdoors. And so we also were able to do a walk and talk where we focused on the idea of how we identify as trees, how we relate to trees, and what trees stand out in our lives. And that is the practice that we call a tree address.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're often having to fill out our street address.
Right.
And so the idea is that the tree address is a tree that represents you either in a physical place or, maybe even in a spiritual sense, where you identify with this tree in a very positive and affirming way. And so for me, the tree I identify with most is the willow tree.
Okay.
And the weeping willow tree, and my grandfather just really he was a gardener, avid gardener, and his parents were gardeners, and he really wanted me to just acknowledge and represent and greet this willow tree that was in our neighborhood, and it's since been uprooted, but the space that drew him to that neighborhood has an abundance of willow trees.
Okay.
And I won't name that space right now, but what I will say is it's a garden on a private university that is filled with willow trees, and it's really, really beautiful for me to just know that even though the willow tree that introduced me to weeping willows is no longer there, we can go to these gardens and be amongst willow trees. And we recently started learning about willow baskets tree,
Okay.
and so it's been nice for me to identify with that tree. And those are some of the things we did on the day that we acknowledge as Earth Day. And also wanted to just mention in terms of honoring Earth. Um, One thing I like to do daily is just to really kind of focus on how honoring Earth is part of my faith, and it really allows me to share like the concept between the play on words with equally yoked yoga. As a Christian, I have also studied many different religions and all these things, and I've really felt that I wanted to make a statement with being, um, excuse me, with being connected to nature and earth. And so yoga generally talks about union, and equally yoked or being yoked also talks about union and being aligned with one another. And so we look at our planet as a parent, and so we look at just the union of all of the aspects of my life as being a tribute to how nature, um, you know, trees, plants, all of everything that populates this earth is um, a part of my faith. And so I just wanted to share that through honoring the reality that so many things are connected, and these things come together for me. Um, and they're not at odds. That is how I really try to just honor the earth every day by sharing like my own testimony as to how these things, these concepts really fuse and come together rather than our, well, rather than um, our competing with one another.
Yeah, and I like how you like kind of brought that all together and connected it all together. For those who don't know what the environmental justice principles are, there are like at least 20 plus principles that we abide by, and connecting nature, with people, all the different ecosystems. And I like how you brought that in within religion, Christian religion, because most religions do say that we should be stewards to the earth, and of course take care of it. And so I appreciate you lifting that up, which sends out a moral call to people of all different faiths to act on climate, environmental justice in ways that they're able to, embrace it. So I wanted to ask you, with all this excitement around connecting with nature, trees, the willow tree, what are what are some things that brings you excitement, and joy, especially doing environmental and climate move justice work, and then also being in nature, being a gardener? What brings you joy with all of that? I see you smile, so I'm thinking it definitely got to be gardening.
Wow. The first thing that comes to mind with uh, with environmental justice and gardening, the joy is the multi-generational
Hmm.
involvement. So the youth were so excited on Monday to get their hands in the dirt, and it kind of reminded some of us of playing with mud pies and all these
Hmm.
things, and um, and just being outdoors for hours, just
Hmm.
with allowing our creativity to foster. And so for me, we think about my ancestors and how while people have been displaced,
Hmm.
as we talk about environmental justice, housing crises and things of that sort that have displaced my people and my ancestors over time, has not has not had the power to uproot all the plants that were planted and all of the trees that remain on the lands where my ancestors have been stewards.
Hmm.
And so I'm very excited to like at times drive by um, homes or my forever home that I um, will always hold dear, and see the plants in this season, especially um, spring up, the flowers blooming, knowing that my grandparents planted those flowers,
Hmm.
knowing that here in Indianapolis, we were one of 5 infantries for U.S. colored troops in the 1800s, and the fact that there was an orchard, an apple orchard that was set up by the Lenape people that was able to not only nourish this infantry of U.S. colored troops, but also it was able to survive. And so there's still a tree that exists. And so for me, when we think about plants and trees and flowers and just the abundance of um, greenery and green spaces uh, that continue to live on as we may be displaced or move or migrate. They tell our stories very much so, and sometimes there are trees, um, which are, people gather around trees for storytelling and
Hmm.
all of these different things where these trees represent generations
Hmm.
of of resilience.
Yeah.
And so I just really think that makes me happiest about just the lineage and the story, the line of storytelling and the keepers of stories that these plants can be. And it's also exciting to just see the light in the eyes of youth when they're involved with learning about organic processes.
So just hearing you talk about, historical and the history of our people. I know my mother, for example, when we're taking a road trip to like Mississippi, she always say, a lot of these trees have a story to tell. They've seen a lot and they're holding like a lot of our histories. And I know, of course, I know what she's referring to. A lot of people have walked through those trees just to survive and to escape to freedom. So I wanted to switch gears in regards to, people showing up in the environmental and climate movement that are different from us, right?
Mm-hmm.
What could you explain more? How does being an advocate for mental health look like, especially when the work that we do? We just had a couple webinars on climate anxiety and how that is also an impact on mental health. And we're going into the summer seasons, and sometimes that triggers people who live in the Gulf South because of hurricanes, or people who experience utility shutoffs because we're experiencing more tornadoes. But is there anything else you would like to, how do we create more space for people who are different, or um who may not see this as a mental health issue? Like, you want to talk more about that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking that question. I am a mental health advocate.
Mhm.
I'm a certified peer recovery coach, and so I really focus on building into the conversation and the actions the need to um, create more space for people of different abilities. I consider myself uh, differently abled, more so than disabled. And so building spaces where people of different abilities can um, share our different perspectives,
Mhm.
and uh, also just the value of our presence. And so um, I was able to attend the climate anxiety and mental health 101 webinar with Bailey. And I really appreciated not only the mindfulness practices that were built into the webinar, just a moment to set intention, um, to breathe, and also to acknowledge that mental health is affected by environmental crises on so many different levels, and especially in terms of anxiety of how we are addressing climate change, and and the list goes on. And so I think where we have this huge topic, this almost endless topic of how environmental issues can affect mental health, and how um, environmental issues, or injustices rather, affect our neurological processes, and create different illnesses. The one thing that I try to focus on most is how we can bring and encourage more people who identify as differently abled or disabled, or neurodivergent, as in my case, to be in on the conversation, and to give people space, to give people the floor who have um, these experiences and these these stories on how we are affected by environmental crises. And so the last thing I want to say about that is, um, for even in this moment, I struggle a bit to keep up, with the pace of
Mhm.
expressing what I'm wanting to say. And I think if we just acknowledge that we need more patience,
Mhm.
we need more patience to breathe, to take a moment and 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 not fill space with words
Mhm.
every nanosecond and every moment, and to really allow people the time it takes to express what input they have on the conversation. And so I think about how, when people, let's say people who are neurodivergent as myself, uh, when we um, take our time to really share very authentic expressions,
Mhm.
people are often rushed, or sentences are attempted to be completed, or the idea is, kind of given a summary or an overview, is what I was thinking, in terms of trying to keep up
Mhm.
with agendas and pace and all these things. And so, one thing I would suggest is just, you know, giving someone the floor without um, trying to push someone into a box, or you know an idea that's that takes less time
Mhm.
than just giving them the time to like express what we're trying to say. And so, oh yeah, that's pretty much how I'll share that. I think that it's, again, maybe I'm being repetitive, but to say it in another way, to hear people of different abilities, to hear us out, and um, to allow us to share, just um, how this crisis is affecting us in varying ways.
You know what? And for our equity summit, we're going to have someone from sustainability. It's a national organization for, and I don't want to misinterpret this, disabled individuals who are impacted by the climate movement. And I was also at a conference, like, and they were talking about building codes and how do we bring in more accessibility to individuals that are impacted by inefficient buildings. And so it was a different outlook that I totally forgot about when we think about equity, right? And I think when we're zooming in to meetings and things of that nature, people learn in different ways. And I think, and I know it can be scary to speak up and say, hey, no, for me, I know I learn differently too as well. So I'm like, hey, can you slow down? Sometimes it's helpful for me to get a recording so I can go back and digest a lot of what I heard. So I know people learn differently. But for me, I know it's scary for me to sometimes say that because one, I'm a leader. Indian people assume that you should be this type of person, not knowing that you have like the learning disabilities on the back end. Like people don't know that about you. So it's scary to actually announce it, right? So I think my question to you, Aprili, is like, how would you offer someone who is leading an organization, focus on equity, to bring that to the forefront? Like, because we want to have a welcoming space for everyone, and we don't want to dismiss anyone. But like, how would you? And I can use my sister for example. My sister is disabled, and she don't mind me saying this, but she won't ever let you call her that.
Okay.
She won't ever let you call her that because she does operate efficiently by herself. Um, and she's able to get around by herself better than I could. I cannot do public transit. My sister can. I'm actually
Hmm.
scared of it, right? getting on trains. I actually still go to the airport 2 hours early. I don't care if I can get TSA or not because I'm scared of the hustle and bustle. So whereas she's able to just do it, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. So she won't let you call her that, and we don't actually call her that because we know actually what she can do. So I guess, and I think people got to be open to correction too. That's another
Oh
thing.
yeah.
So I guess for someone who like me who's leading, this movement around buildings, climate, like what does accessibility look like before we, transition off? And I know we all can't put everyone in the box because I just explained to I do have a disability, but I don't tell people that, not yet right now. I don't
Right.
I don't know because you're not gonna put me in the box. You're not gonna be like Marnese can't do this. No, I'm not even gonna tell you what it is.
Right.
No. So
Well,
yeah.
well, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you because this, to me, the um, the vulnerability and the openness and the ability to to say, hey, I also have these challenges, or however people describe
Mhm.
um, their journey. Um, it's a beautiful thing. I just want to acknowledge you and say thank you for sharing, and for being vulnerable in that way. And of course, I I have studied a lot of language. I've studied so many things, but a lot of language. I'm bilingual, and um, have really, I really believe that people should self-identify
Okay.
and really should decide: does this phrase or term represent me? Uh, do I want to hold on to this term that's traditionally condescending, or all these things, or do I want to go a different route and use something that I believe is more empowering, or things like that? And so, just wanted to mention that in terms of using whatever word and term best fits one's identity. So I use many terms depending on what I'm describing about my journey. And so, in terms of accessibility, we have a long way to go. We have so long to go because when someone does self disclose uh, a disabled identity, a neurodivergent identity, all these different things, the biases start creeping in, the implicit biases, all the different, um, at times, discrimination, all the different isms and all these things start to be compiled and intersect. And so, um, for me, it starts with how we think, and we can talk about um, building buildings that are accessible in terms of allowing for, you know physical disabilities um, to not uh, to not be a hindrance into accessing a building or things of that sort. For example, I live in housing um, that is attributed to disabled people, and so um, people who identify as having a physical disability live on the lower um, levels of my building, closer to, of course, the ground level. And so there are so many things that can be done in terms of planning. Um, and ultimately, my belief is that we have to start with our education and how we are going about um, allowing stigma to fester in terms of not valuing people regardless of ability. Um, and so, for me, I believe that ableism is the the big, um, what is it? invisible um, issue that we don't address enough. Um, we can see so many different isms in terms of colorism, racism, and of course, in many ways, physical disabilities. And we just don't have the conversation enough, and um, we're not on an education policy level
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the need to uh, acknowledge the array or the extent of disability that we experience across the world, um, that are oftentimes invisible. And so, um, I think the last thing that I want to say about accessibility and how, and I know you did mention. I know we're gonna have to hop off. I know you did mention, like, in terms of organizing and all these different components that go into uh, being uh, fully in your own energy as a disabled person, and as someone who wants to make accessibility a reality. It just makes me believe that if we, just as much as we acknowledge land, as just as much as we acknowledge people for accolades and all these things, if we just start by acknowledging that people of varying abilities have so much to contribute to each space, um, and build that into all that we teach, um, then I think that we'll start to shift, and we will see, um, we'll see a difference in terms of allowing people to be seen as worthy, as for our full worth of a part of the fabric of humanity.
That's definitely a quotable moment, and I know you that Maggie, she will highlight that on our social media. And the key word I think you for me was worthy and humanity. I think we have to see ourselves in each other, and of course the whole golden rule: treat each other how we want to be treated. And I think that just goes along with the climate movement and the work that we're doing as organizers, as mental health coaches, experts, and all the work that we do. We have to lean into treating other people how we want to be treated. And that's the bottom line. So before we hop up, I know you're definitely passionate about a lot of the different intersecting social movements that we're all a part of. So what do you like to do, like, in your spare time? We definitely got to have you back on the podcast. We're going to keep doing this, so don't
Oh
worry
yeah.
about it. You got to come back, because I mean, podcasting is fun. So what do you like doing in your free time? I hope you get some free time. Do you make free time for yourself? What do you do?
I do. I do make free time for myself, and it's really kind of funny if you ask me, because sometimes I make free time because I do actually pray about free time, because at at one point I've just felt so exhausted that I felt like, um, it was it was even hard to conceptualize, like, how exhausted I felt. And so I really prayed about free time, and I was just like given, like a burden was kind of lifted off of my shoulders. And so, what I love to do in my free time is to garden. I do love to to create herb gardens, and, like, especially pot gardens, because herbs oftentimes are very easily manageable, um, in pots and in on balconies and urban spaces. And so I love the idea of creating just these urban green spaces for people, and um, and just the idea of having like an herb garden in your home, especially in pots, because they're so um, you know mobile. There, so much can be done with moving around uh, these these pot gardens, and so it's so nice to just be able to cook, like, let's say, uh, a meal that's Italian inspired, maybe a lasagna, maybe um, let's just say a lasagna, and to go to your balcony garden, or your porch garden, your herb garden, and to grab some basil and to grab some rosemary. And there's something so amazing about having your own herb garden that I love to share with people. And I'm starting to learn about creating rose gardens, and more so potted rose gardens, where um, roses that thrive in pots um, can can be shared with people in urban landscapes. You may hear some of the city sounds. I'm here on my balcony, and so I'm very excited about bringing greenery into urban spaces.
Nice. Nice. So we're definitely gonna have to have you back on. Where I think we're gonna do a training around green gentrification, green capitalism. It's like a series around that. So I'm see how we can fix you back on here. But we're going to be closing soon because we have another schedule something after this. So we want to thank you, Aprili, for coming on to our Everyday Earth Day podcast with Midwest BDC. Of course, we can't wait to see you in another meeting and learn about all the awesome stuff that you're continuing to do in Indianapolis. I am loving the outfit. Green is actually my favorite color.
Oh, thank you.
So I love it. It's like vibing. It's like also giving me fall vibes, with the colors.
Oh,
Yeah, but it looks very pretty. So
thank
I
you.
want to invite everyone on. To continue to stay up to date on what's going on with Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition as we continue to grow, expand, revamp the work that we're doing on the local to national level on and beyond. So visit us at midwestdecarb.org. And we will be having another series of podcasts coming up. But then also we do have a training coming up tomorrow. Yes, going back to those housing and tax credits. Training to get prepared at the state level, more around affordable housing is definitely needed across the Midwest, and facilitating this just transition, okay, because we want to make sure that we're in alignment with that type of framework. So please continue to follow us on midwestbdc.org. Membership is free, and continue to look at what Aprili is doing and other members are doing in the Midwest in regards to building
Well,
decarbonization. And you want to say one last thing?
oh yes, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all of Midwest BDC for just being in community,
Mhm.
and I'm so glad that we were able to have this podcast and be with one another for this time.
Yes, and you know what? I don't know if you heard the song from Tony Jones, "Take Up Spaces," um, but if not, I'm gonna text you it because that's one of my songs. It's actually on my. I pinned it on my Facebook page. It was like a birthday video that I made, and the song is "Take Up Space" because Black women, especially with all the topics and everything that you brought up, we have to continue to take up space, and Um, and that's it's okay, right? So take up space apparently, um, and continue to do all the work that you're doing. So thank you all for viewing us on our social media: LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and YouTube. So continue following us and look at all the work that our members like Aprili is doing. So talk to you all soon.
Thank you.